Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Self-Build and Renovation. My name is Gavin. I'm your host. Kelly, and hello, Chris.
Hi, how you
Hello.
doing?
How are you getting on?
Yeah, we're all good. Thank you very much. And have you had a good weekend?
Yes, not been too bad. Weather's not really holding out now, but we'll get there.
And where are you based? You're in Scotland, and
Yep.
you're in
We're in
Dingwall.
Dingwall, yeah. Dingwall's where our office is based. We've got a heat pump running here, so yeah, it's Dingwall.
Yeah. Good. And Chris, are you in Dingwall as well? Or are you in...
Well, I'm working. I work in Dingwall, but I'm in Inverness. I commute up every day, so it's not that far. Just down the road.
And how are things generally in terms of the industry? Obviously, we've had a few impacts with COVID, and the building industry has obviously had a stop for a while. But I think there's been some good signs of things starting again.
Yeah, it's been really good for us. We were closed and just operating an emergency service, so we had engineers still covering Scotland while we were on lockdown. So all the team's back, all the engineers are back, so we're back into the swing of things and got a busy few weeks ahead of us. So yeah, it's all looking good now.
That's good. And do you see any kind of impacts to your own kind of supply chain as well? I mean, in terms of manufacturing all the kind of equipment that's required to supply you guys, I mean, how's that looking?
Go on, Kelly. How long have you got?
I know. It's been okay. It's definitely been impacted in certain aspects of it. A lot of the general trades are open again, which is really good. Some of them are working on reduced hours. But we've had a huge increase. We've got quite a busy few weeks coming up. A lot of people, I think, during lockdown, rather than doing DIY in their garden, was wanting to do some DIY on their house. So there's a lot of people wanting to do stuff. So I think the supply chain's kind of trying to react to it now and get back into the swing of things. But hopefully over the next sort of month or two, as things sort of come back to what is a new normal, it'll be a little bit easier and it'll recover a little bit better than it has so far. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a challenge for all business. I mean, obviously, I'm based in Aberdeen. You guys are based up in Dingwall and Inverness, and it's it's fair to say that the whole industry is actually struggling to understand how they can react to the delay, because ultimately the delay is going to create an impact in terms of supply moving forward. So hopefully we can actually kind of address that, and we kind of manage the whole kind of impact as best we can. So no, I really appreciate you guys joining us. It's one of these questions and topics that people look at and think about and understand. Okay, well, what are we doing with our house? What are we going to do with a new build? But not just a new build, but it could also be the kind of retrofit as well. So it'd be interesting to see how heat pumps and how generally just kind of managing the kind of the eco environment in the homes is actually managed by you guys and what you can provide. So we've got a wee presentation that you guys have kindly prepared, and we're going to kind of put that up on screen, and hopefully everyone enjoys it. Please, if you're joining us from YouTube or Facebook, please post your questions. We're here to help. We want to make sure that if you've got your own project and you've got any questions, that you use this as an opportunity to really get the answers to your questions. So feel free to post your comments in the feed, and we can address your questions at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully it all kind of works. And yeah, any questions, feel free to pass them in the feed. So give me a second. I will work out how to do this. There we go. And let me just share the screen.
Especially in this new online format. It's my hope this evening to give...
Sorry, here we go.
Good evening. I hope you've all had a lovely Sunday afternoon. My name is Kelly, and it's a pleasure to be here on behalf of Isle Renewables, especially in this new online format. It's my hope this evening to give you a brief insight into how a heat pump could be the ideal solution for heating your home. I'll start with a brief presentation before handing over to my colleague Chris, who as technical engineer is here to answer any questions you may have. Heat pumps are fast becoming a way of life. If we're to relieve the pressure on our environment, continuing change is required. As many of you may have seen, there's been an increase in the media coverage on the importance of renewables and changes to our day-to-day lives. People are already taking steps to change their daily routines by adapting to eco-conscious practices, with programs like TerraCycle being introduced, and even more so with people making more mindful choices with shopping for clothing and produce. Considering switching to a renewable heat pump could be the perfect option to reduce your carbon footprint further, and a vital step to future-proof your new build or renovation project. Heat pumps are important for lowering carbon emissions and securing our energy future. This is by minimising the impact on the environment caused by our reliance on finite resources like fossil fuels. With the recent downturn of oil affecting Scotland in particular, it is more important than ever that we look to the options that can meet our energy needs going forward. Even more importantly, for most of our clients, you can benefit directly from reductions in your heating bills. Heat pumps draw on solar energy stored in both the ground and atmosphere. There's two main types of heat pump, and each is more suited to a particular environment. It's important to discuss early on and establish your needs to identify the most suitable system for your home. This can depend on a number of factors: your budget, the number of occupants living in the home, how many showers you like to take, the intended purpose of the house, whether it's your permanent residence, holiday home, all sort of factors that we would discuss into deciding what was most viable for you. My plan is to show you a couple of examples of heat pumps that we've installed for both ground source and air source, and give you an idea of what they look like and what you can expect. Up first, this is a ground source heat pump. We have installed both of these quite recently, actually. One is in Peterhead and one in Inverurie, if I remember correctly. So my reasoning for showing you these photos in particular, it gives you a really good idea of the space you'd be looking to have for a ground source heat pump. So in the first photo on my left, the large unit that looks a little bit like a freestanding fridge, that's your heat pump. In the centre, we have a small 100-litre buffer vessel, and on the right-hand side is your hot water cylinder. In the second photo, it's slightly different. Heat pump on the left, the same with the first. In the middle, we have a different type of cylinder, and on the right-hand side is your buffer, which is a larger buffer in this case. We advise normally you need around 2.5 to 2.75 metres of dedicated wall space. These photos kind of show you the ideal scenario. In both of these instances, we had dedicated garage space from our clients. They had designated as their plant room, so it kind of allowed us to fit everything quite comfortably spaced apart, but obviously ideal solution. Our design team will discuss the space you have available, what requirements are needed for each technology, and just see whether it's going to be a viable option for you. The second thing to consider when you're looking at a ground source heat pump is how you're actually going to harness the energy from the ground. The most cost-effective way of doing this is the horizontal ground collectors. This photo shows you a typical trench. They're usually 1 metre deep, 1 metre apart, but they can be done in any patterns that's convenient for you. So based on what space you have, we've done them looped, coiled, straight lines, whatever's easiest. As you can see, they had quite a lot of space in this field, so it really does just depend on what's suitable for your property. However, if you don't have the space, there still is an option. It's slightly more expensive, but you can consider a vertical borehole collector. In this case, the rig that you can see in this photo, which takes up very little space in comparison, will just drill vertically down. Usually it's about 100, 200 metres deep, depending on what sort of heat you're needing to take. So there is an option if you don't have a space, so don't be too fearful. If you have your plot already and you don't think you maybe have the space for ground collectors, there is an option, and that's something, once again, that we would talk through with you. So just to summarise some of the benefits of ground source heat pump, it is slightly more efficient than air, as I said, just because you have that constant temperature. It offers a whole house solution. It does both your heating and your hot water, so you need no separate system. There's no need for tedious fuel deliveries, having to order your oil, anything like that. It is all fit and forget. Up next is the air source heat pump. So this heat pump works by extracting the heat from the outside air and using it to provide your heating and hot water for your home or business. Even in the coldest winters, modern systems will convert 1 unit of energy into 3.5 units of heat. That takes the air from outside, pumps it through a heat exchanger, where the heat is absorbed by a refrigerant. Once this is converted to provide the heating and hot water for your property, the refrigerant is ready to absorb more energy from the air, and the process repeats. So in the first photo, you can see an outdoor unit. This is an 8.5 Mitsubishi standard heat pump. The only thing you would have to think about on top of this is room for your cylinder inside. In the second photo, I thought I'd give you a bit of variation of what you can have if necessary. This is a retrofitted property, so it's an older property at a higher heat loss figure. And in this instance, we had to use 2 heat pumps working in cascade to meet the requirements for the property. And same again, you've got the ultra quiet unit in the first photo and a slightly older model in the second photo. So why should you choose air source, and why should you have that over ground source? Well, as you can see, it takes up a lot less space internally. It would just be to consider for your hot water cylinder. We usually say it's 900mm by 900mm cylinder cupboard, 1 meter by 1 meter to be safe. So it's a lot less space than you would have to consider for ground source. It is also cheaper to install than ground source. So usually it can be a lot more viable for people on a budget. The other thing is it's basically fit and forget technology. They're very low maintenance. There's very little that you need to do with them. You do have to get them serviced annually to fall in line with your warranty, but other than that, they're usually virtually fit and forget. Another thing to discuss when looking at a heat pump in your property is what type of heating circuit you intend to have. Heat pumps are designed to run at a lower temperature, creating the perfect indoor climate, but they integrate seamlessly with underfloor heating and wet radiator systems. It all comes down to your personal preference. We have a number of clients that love having underfloor heating on both levels. You can have underfloor heating on your ground floor with radiators on the first floor. It's really down to you and whatever you prefer. They work perfectly with a heat pump, so you can consider everything. You have the freedom to choose the style and design of the radiators of your choice. And another thing to consider, which I think is a great and safe option for any families that have little kids running about the house, is your radiators will feel warm rather than hot to the touch, as they can do with gas or oil boilers. So that's something else to consider. So we install 2 types of heat pump, but we were also trained in a number of others. So we service a lot of heat pumps that we don't actually install. But for air source heat pumps, we predominantly use Mitsubishi Electric. So they're the leading air source heat pump manufacturer, and they offer the modern ultra quiet units, as I showed you in the photos before, and which make less noise than a typical oil boiler. They have sizes ranging from 5 kilowatt to 14 kilowatt. And as I said before, you have the option to cascade these where your property requires a higher capacity. Isle Renewables ourselves, we are net service partners, so you get a 5 years parts and labour warranty as standard, and we're also able to offer our clients an extension of 2 years, giving you 7 years in total of your warranty. For ground source heat pumps, we use Nibi, which are a Swedish company. Some people say Nibi, depending on what you prefer. So it's Swedish technology developed over 30 years. They, as many people know, I know personally, my family lives in Sweden. They experience temperatures drastically colder than the UK, down to like minus 30 degrees in some cases I've experienced. We are Nibi VIP installers, so we're fully trained and accredited. And because of this, we can offer you a 7-year warranty. For underfloor heating, we use Robot, who are based in Inverness and are really, really great. So the government have introduced regulations and incentives to encourage you to use alternative heating systems. Scotland has pledged to be net zero by 2045, 5 years ahead of the rest of the UK. They back this up by offering ways to make heat pump technology viable for most people and reduce their dependence on carbon-based fuels, as they understand this is vital in meeting their goals. So first up, we have the renewable heat incentive. which is provided by the government and is made up of payments that are made quarterly over 7 years. The amount you receive will depend on a number of factors, including the type of technology you install, the latest tariffs available, and even in some cases, metering. When designing your system, you'll be provided with a system performance estimate, which gives you an insight into not only the savings that can be made on your heating, but also the RHI income you can expect following installation. This incentive was due to finish next year, but in March, the UK government announced that we'll be extending it until the end of March 2022, giving you more time to make the most of the opportunity. Secondly, you have the Energy Saving Trust loan. So it's an interest-free loan which offers you up to £10,000 towards the cost of installing a heat pump. We have a number of clients that take advantage of this and are able to do so, particularly because we're an MCS accredited installer. As I said before, overall for a lot of people, the most important factor for them is the fact that it will reduce their carbon footprint. So I definitely wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say why you should choose Isle Renewables as an installer if you are considering a heat pump. So we are MCS accredited installers. You're able to take advantage of various incentives, grants available in Scotland to enable you to future-proof your home. Not only that, Isle Renewables will be celebrating our 10th year of business this year. With a wealth of experience and knowledge at our disposal, we are able to ensure the highest level of workmanship and quality are provided to you as our client at all times. We cover the length and breadth of Scotland with experience working as far north as Shetland and as far south as Ayrshire, but we also cover the islands, we cover Aberdeen, we've installed in Edinburgh. Basically, anywhere you want us to go, we'll do our best to go. We're on hand from the initial contact, offering advice, design, installation, and servicing of your system. We offer a service plan to all of our clients to make sure your system is correctly maintained annually, as well as offering a discount of 10% and guaranteed attendance within 3 business days for emergencies. So I think you've probably heard enough of me. At this point, I will be passing you on to my colleague Chris, who will likely be able to deal with some more technical queries or just any more queries you may have had. But I really hope you enjoyed listening to this, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I appreciate that. Obviously, there's a lot of information to take in within 10 minutes. I mean, just a couple of questions that really hits me straight away is the grants and incentives. That's obviously quite a good incentive for you guys to kind of explain to your clients what is available. I mean, is that something that's changing all the time, or has there been grants and incentives been available for quite a while, or how does the whole thing work?
Yeah, well, do you want to take over, Kelly, or do you want to?
Yeah, you can go ahead with that one.
Fair enough. In terms of the industry loan, that is at the moment it's £10,000 for a heat pump, both air and ground. That has been 10k from the day that it started. The terms have actually got a wee bit better over the last couple of years too. I think the general idea is that they're gonna keep it running, and if they're not hitting their targets and they're it's working out really well, people are paying it back, then they're just going to keep it going. We can't predict the future, but at the moment it appears to be going quite strong in terms of the loan. There's been no change in terms of the money that they're given. The RHI for air and ground has only ever gone up. Air went up dramatically. I don't know what the government was thinking, but air is the most convenient kind of technology to install. And by bumping up the RHI for ground, bumping up the RHI for air, it's kind of just encouraging more and more people to go for it.
And does that also apply? I mean, obviously we've got new builds, we've got retrofitting. I mean, how does this all apply to an existing house where you may want to make a change to how you heat your house? I mean, are these incentives available across the board?
They are. In fact, one negative thing for an older property is that when the RHI first came out, it was uncapped. It was, whatever energy you went through, that's how much RHI money you got. Eventually, the government had to cap it. It's still quite high, but yeah, there were, if you had an old farm, an old 100-year-old bothy, There's people that can make quite a lot of money in the RHI, and now they've just had to cap it. It's still reasonable for people, and we let people know roughly what they're going to get. We always try and estimate the best we can. Retrofit new build. Shockingly, if you spend a lot of money on your new build or renovate a property, you will cut down how much energy you go through, which will drop your energy bill, but it will drop your RHI too.
And you mentioned £10,000. I mean, how does that reflect to the actual installation costs? I mean, are we talking, does it really depend on the size of the house and in terms of heating specifications, or, how does £10,000 reflect to the actual overall installation cost?
Yeah, every property will be different. There's a big difference between a 5 kilowatt heat pump and a 14 kilowatt heat pump in terms of cost. Roughly, the 10 grand will typically cover most of air. Air heat pump and the hot water tank. The 10 grand will probably cover most of that, if not all of it, in 90% of the situations. Ground, it's about double the cost of air. The 10 grand will get about halfway.
Wow. Okay. No, it's interesting because you mentioned there that hopefully this incentivization doesn't go away. It's something that really helps us to to get over the overall cost, which I assume without the very start of the project. How does the actual payment mechanism work? Do you, if you engage this installation, do you have to pay all up front, or is there a payment plan, or can you wait until you get the government grant coming through, or how does it all?
In Scotland, it's the industry loan in Scotland only, and they've been really great. They'll actually, for the most part, they'll match payment terms. Mm-hmm. So they'll cover, stage payment of the loan, upfront payment and then payment afterwards to help cover it. Initially, if you read the terms of the loan, it's almost like a loan after the install. But Home Energy Scotland, who run it, they've been great. They have no problem. They've had no problem to make a payment upfront.
Sorry, Kelly.
The only thing to consider when it comes to the loan, as far as the terms, is we can't actually start work on site until you've had firm approval, had that in writing. But that's usually quite a good stage because we speak to clients right from the beginning. So at the point that we find out they're going for the loan, they usually have a good amount of time before they're looking to start to make sure that they've got that in writing. And then from that point on, you will basically get invoiced from us, and they'll match that cost from the loan, get that paid in, and then we'll go on to site. So yeah, it's quite a smooth process. I think compared to a lot of other type of loans, they do their best to make it as easy as possible.
And so just explain the whole process. So basically, I'm thinking about how I'm going to heat my house. I'm going to go and phone Isle Renewables, for example, and you guys are going to come on site, and you're going to do what is it? How does the whole process work? I guess you do a survey or something, or?
Yeah, what we try to do, we try to keep. There's a lot of the stuff that we just have to put in writing. It's part of the accreditation that we do. Everything, there's kind of a step by step. It all has to have a paper trail, and we try to give people an idea of cost beforehand. At that point, we put an engineer. It'll be one of our plumbers that will go out. They'll, free of charge. They go out and have a look. Their plumbers are there just to look at the practicality of the install. Where the pipe run will be, what the quality of the pipe work you've already got. They'll run it through. And then they'll come back and we'll work through design, work through the official quote, provide a fixed quote. And at that point, if you want to go ahead, then you apply for the loan.
Okay. And obviously there's various other kind of installations that are available out there in the market. how does that, do you kind of go on site and say, okay, well, in terms of the land that you've got available, you mentioned there in your presentation about an installation that requires so much site land, if you like. Do you obviously, do you kind of say, okay, well, this is actually best for your kind of installation, or how does the whole kind of installation choice work? Because I guess there's heat, but again, that could come from any kind of different installations.
The trick there is just there's no right or wrong. The trick is just to give everyone every option that you can, pro and con for everything, and for the client to make a decision. It's really not for us to dictate what they should go for. In our mind, if it'll work, then that's all we really care about. We're here to make it work, and we're not here to push people down a particular route.
Yeah.
But we do also pride ourselves on, if a certain technology is not viable for a property, but an alternative is a better option, we will try and like fit what's best for each scenario, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I guess this applies also to, you know, where there's not even anything on site. I mean, I guess the site visits that you do could be a completely greenfield site.
New buildings are straightforward. It's not a challenge in any way. You have a lot of freedom because you can, if you plan ahead and get in touch early, you can map out what you need when you need it at the right time. Retrofits they're more interesting, won't deny it, and they're more fun too. You have to get a bit imaginative and work it through.
I guess brownfield sites as well. I mean, that's even put another kind of dynamic in there, is where you're trying to visualize what the client is ultimately trying to achieve, but at the same time you're trying to work out the properties that you're trying to to engage in that kind of property as well, and that project. So yeah, I mean, how far afield do you guys operate? I mean, you mentioned there that you do down to Edinburgh and all the rest of it. I mean, ultimately I guess you will travel as far as you need to make sure that your clients get what they want to achieve.
Yeah, so we've installed in a lot of parts of Scotland. We've got a lot of them local to us, a lot of people that are like neighbours of ours on the Black Isle and whatnot, but we'll go up to Caithness. We've installed in Orkney, so yeah, we're pretty happy to, once we've quoted people and sort of given them an idea of the price and what's viable for them, we'll consider every avenue to get to wherever they are. There's certain areas we don't really operate in as much as others, but we are very prominent on the islands, and that sort of, we tend to go to like the small islands that a lot of people won't go to as well. So like we've been to Isla and Jura. So yeah, we'll pretty much go where we're needed.
Yeah, I guess technology as well. Is technology changing, or is technology in terms of your environment, is it kind of like stayed the same, or how's that evolving?
I think when it comes to the heat pump technology, there's not much fluctuation. I mean, there is a change on occasion, like a change in the refrigeration that they put in it, the refrigerant. I think the big things that are changing now are online connectivity. It seems to be the next stage. I mean, they're already there already. They're just kind of like, I think any heat pump tends to be fairly modern with that kind of mentality, but I think they're all kind of almost, instead of a bolt-on, an add-on, they're just coming built in the standard, all Wi-Fi connected.
Wow. Okay, it's quite interesting. It's an interesting one because it's one of these unseen kind of technologies that really has a huge impact on, one is the comfort of your own home, but also the running of your home and the costs associated with that as well. So if you don't get it right at the very start, I guess you could actually end up with problems that, throughout the whole build and ultimately through the operation of your home as well. So do you tend to get involved in the architects and specifications, throughout the whole kind of build, or where do you slot in? When should someone get in touch with you guys when they're doing a self-build?
I mean, the truth is, I mean, like with everything, like the earlier the better. I mean, we'll never be perfect. I mean, the people that'll turn up, and the property's already built and they're looking for a heat pump, and you just have to make it work. But no, I mean, part of the accreditation in terms of like running costs and how it's all going to run, part of that accreditation that you get, and that we, like as a company, we have to uphold to, like a quality assurance, you have to make sure people have in writing, an idea of, what's going to cost to run, how will it run. I've noticed a comment about reaction time in the comments already. You have to let people know that it's part of the rules. You have to follow that. And I think the government's trying to make the industry quite strict to make sure that you don't lose control over it and you don't get too many people coming in doing a bad job and the industry getting a bad rep.
Mm. It's slightly different when it comes to the actual installation side of it. It's always good to plan really far ahead, but we do tend to come a little bit later in the process than a lot of other trades, essentially. If we're doing underfloor heating or even the radiators, we'll come in at a slightly earlier stage, get that done before you're doing like your second fix and that of the house. And obviously the ground collectors can really be done before the house is up or as soon as you are looking to go ahead. But really the heat pump's quite close to the end. So yeah, you've got quite a lot done before that, but it is good to think about it as soon as possible.
And in terms of multi-heating sources or cooling sources as well, I mean, you talked about in your presentation about having upstairs, downstairs, and various other installations. I mean, in terms of mixing up the whole installation, is that a good thing, bad thing? Is it dependent on the actual development itself, or you've got solar, you've got all sorts of other ways of being able to heat your home? I mean, what is the right solution? Clearly, it's down to the actual development itself. But how do you come to your solution for the end user?
Kind of go back to what we were talking about before. There's no right, as long as it will work, we have no problem with what people want to do. If a client came and the solution was wrong, we wouldn't get involved in it. We would let them know. We wouldn't get involved in it. But at that point, you go back to giving everyone every option. And then just go over what will be good, what will be bad, and how it will all work together. Combining them straightforward, having them on their own straightforward. The best thing to do is just give everyone all the information for them to take a step back and think about it and work out what's best for them.
Okay. And going back to my previous question, in terms of, I'm thinking about doing a self-build. Should I engage with you guys, or is that going to cause complications down the line? Should I just really route that conversation through the architect, or?
I really would advise getting in touch with a renewable installer quite early on. A lot of the making sure heat pump big enough for a build is not actually complicated. Make sure you've got enough domestic water, not that complicated. The big issue we find is that there's not enough room for equipment. It's the age-old problem. It's shocking. You can't find room for a hot water tank. One advantage an oil boiler would have over a heat pump is that you actually have a smaller hot water tank. So an architect might tend to put a cupboard that they're used to, that would fit a boiler hot water tank, and that just won't be suitable for a heat pump. It needs more room. Not much more room, but I mean, storage in a property, it's finite. You can't have cupboards everywhere. But if you get involved early, you just avoid a lot of grief later on, trying to find room and potentially losing a room that you didn't want to lose. That's usually the big thing, getting involved early.
Yeah, that's something that really just, again, it's one of these things. It's like one of our recent events up in Inverness. I sat through a presentation about blinds, and who would have thought that if you hadn't thought about blinds far enough in advance, with some of these kind of really modern designs about having apexes and all the rest of it, if you don't really engage early, and actually it's not just about engaging early, it's about understanding. I think in this world of online, it's really quite tempting to go into Google and try and self-learn, but really there's no problems with picking up the phone, having a conversation, and understanding exactly what's out there. I think that's really important for people that in this day and age now really wants to understand exactly how all this kind of goes together.
There's definitely good information online, but like with everything, there is bad information. You can get carried away on occasion, but it's good to have a wee bit of knowledge. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to. Sorry, Kelly.
The good thing with a lot of like the supplier websites and even the Energy Saving Trust, they have the renewable installer finder. So a lot of people that tend to be looking into stuff, there's every single person that has the loan has to review the company that have installed for them. So there's a good database of places local to them, closer installers, whatnot like that, people that are actually accredited to certain manufacturers. They've had to all be reviewed. So that's a really good portal since EST have done that they've been able to look. So some people are able to find good information, especially through a lot of their architects as well. A lot of heat pump installers have quite close relationships with a lot of architects. They're quite good at speaking about things quite early on. So yeah, it's always good if you go direct to the person, but yeah, the information's a little bit better out there that you can get now. So
well, thanks, Kelly. We've had a couple of questions come through just whilst we've been talking online. We've had a question from Alistair Yule, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. So Alistair is kind of considering a GSHP for their new build, providing heat and hot water. They have concerns about recovery times with a high hot water demand. Don't want to constantly boost with electricity. Should they reconsider? Is that something that you guys can advise on?
Yeah, no, it's quite straightforward. When you're looking at how big a heat pump needs to be, you look at the heat load, not the domestic water load. The heat pumps that we do, they can either do heating or hot water. They can't do both. So what will happen when you've got a call for heating, it will divert to heating. It will always prioritize domestic water. When you have a shower or bath, it will divert all the full output of the heat pump to the domestic water tank. So you actually get a big heat pump for the domestic water, because the heating load of a build is much higher than domestic water. So when you actually divert that full load of the heat pump, you've actually got a whopping big heat pump for your domestic water. Another factor there is you've got to make sure that when you're looking at how many bedrooms you got, how many people are going to be there, how many people are going to be living in it, what kind of, do you have an abnormally large bath, power showers. You actually work out the volume of the required domestic water tank at that point. If you like a ground heat pump, you go for 12 kilowatt. It's a 12 kilowatt heat pump. Normally in an immersion in the hot water tank, it's only 3 kilowatts. So you get quite a good reaction time on domestic water, but you have to make sure the domestic water tank, there's enough stored volume there to actually cope initially. It's a wee bit of thought, but again, not overly complicated.
Again, these are one of the things that you can have a conversation about very early on in the project, and you can just understand. I think part of this process is really to understand. And if you don't understand yourself, perhaps kind of keep on asking questions until you do. I mean, I think that's really quite key, because this should be an exciting, enjoyable part of your life. You're building a self-build, or you're doing a major renovation, and I think these things, if you don't enjoy it, then there's probably something, maybe slightly amiss. So it's a complete learning experience, and I think hopefully, Alistair, that kind of answers your question. If not, please come back to us.
Believe me, it's one of the more common questions that we get asked. It's quite a normal one.
And again, is this something that your architect can educationally wise advise on, or would they kind of default to the likes of you guys?
They tend to default to the renewable company for the most part. I mean, there's a lot of architects there that really do know their stuff, but when it comes down to it, they're good at what they do, and we're good at what we do. We're engaging with them all the time. Part of my role in the company is I go out and talk to them quite a bit. Pretty much going over that kind of thing, it's a 4-bedroom property. How big a hot water tank do I need? Okay, how much room will it need? What kind of cupboard will it have? Reaction time to a client, it's quite common that I'll go engage with them too.
And a lot are the kind of grants that are available to new builds. Are they available only in Scotland, or is there differences between England, for example, Wales, and Scotland as well?
The RHI, the Renewable Heat Incentive, Kelly talked about earlier, and that's the grant. You get paid over a 7-year period, and that's UK wide. The interest-free loan, that's Scottish government only. Home Energy Scotland run that.
And is that likely to change, or again, has that been quite a constant over the last few years?
Well, I mean, the RHI for new applicants was meant to stop in March next year. Before in the lockdown, they increased it by another year, March 2022. So they're clearly wanting to keep it running. Again, we can't predict the future, but it's interesting that they are, after the RHI came out, really boosted the industry and got it up and running. It was due to come to the end March next year, and they've already bumped it another year. Again, who knows what the government will do, but it's kind of it's good looking good.
Is that, I mean, why do they keep extending it? I mean, is that because the government has some sort of guidance and sort of some objectives that they have to meet themselves, or is it because there's a demand and it kind of meets the overall desire of the country?
I mean, I couldn't go into too much detail because I don't really know, but I do know that there was something called the feed-in tariff for PV panels and wind and hydro, and they went in with a very high tariff initially. And I'm sure, I don't know, many people will know, it got a bit carried away, and it started costing them a lot more money than they were hoping, so it dropped the tariff dramatically. The RHI came out afterwards, and they have very strict targets to hit. And if they hit those targets, their general idea is to start decreasing the tariff gradually rather than a big drop. And again, it's interesting that the tariff for air and ground have never gone down. They never hit that target. So it could be that just put more money in the pot than they thought.
It is definitely the governments and local councils that are having to turn away from well, there's incentives and certain things in place. I can't think of like the specific dates, but they're trying to turn away from gas and new builds and things like that. So for most people, there has to be a consideration for some type of renewables. That's also at the planning stage. Usually the architects have to consider something. So there's definitely a push towards it over other things. So I think by having these incentives, just it makes it more viable for them to achieve any targets that they may have, to with like Scotland being like wind power and everything like that, is just to further push people towards those, because obviously the technology costs money. It's trying to make it the better option to meet those targets.
No, it's good to. I mean, it's good to push these as well. And I think if you guys are out there, kind of really kind of championing these industry, you know, these kind of technologies. I mean, it's not technology, I guess. It's, you know, it's a good way of being able to contribute towards the environment. You know, the carbon footprint that we're all talking about. It's something that perhaps we didn't understand 10 years ago, but now because of social media and online, we understand it a bit more. So it's really good to understand that these technologies work towards it. We've also had another question in from Ollie. Thanks for your question, Ollie. What happens if there is more than one system? So, for example, air source, heat pump, and PV. Would you coordinate the systems?
Well, PV. I mean, PV generates electricity. A heat pump generates heat. They don't need to be coordinated. I mean, once you install PV, you have that power being fed back to your consumer board. And if your TV or your fridge or whatever, your computer needs power or your heat pump needs power, it'll just take it from the consumer board. They're although they're connected, they don't fight each other, and they just work in the background together. There's nothing over the nothing over the complicated between that. They're completely detached from each other.
Okay, good. Thanks, Ollie, for your question. I appreciate that. John, we've had a question in. What about mini split systems? What can you tell us about them?
I'll be honest, it's not something we do very much. Again, I would need to talk to John a bit more detail, to be honest, about what he would define as a mini split. You get potentially, you could be talking about air to air, because we typically do air to water or ground to water. Both of those are RHI compliant heat pumps. Air to air tend not to be RHI compliant. Well, they're not RHI compliant. They're quite handy for a maybe 1 or 2 room, maybe a 3 room property in the middle of nowhere, where it might be a wee bit cheaper to put in. For the most part, we are doing air to water. But I'll be honest, a mini split, I'd have to have a chat with him to know what he was talking about in a bit more detail.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure John can get in touch with you after this.
Yeah.
There's so many kind of different kind of
terminology. Oh yeah, we've got a new staff, Darren, and Kenna and Kelly's room too. And I feel bad for people just coming in and just the terminology is just there constantly, and we all know it off by heart. And I can tell by the glazed look in their face. It's not straightforward. Yeah.
But, and just on that terminology question, the RHI, remind me what RHI stands for.
Renewable Heat Incentive. So you'll get paid for the whole point is your property will go through. It will use 20,000 kilowatt hours to heat it. The renewable part of that, if you install a heat pump, you'll get paid money from the government for.
Okay. Good. We've also had, I want to get to the questions that we've had before the session, but we're going to have to continue the ones that we've currently received through the session. So we've also received a question from Alistair again. If neither money or space are an issue, which is better, a vertical borehole or a horizontal array?
In terms of how efficient they run, it doesn't matter whatsoever. If you've got the land and you don't mind your land being dug up, then it doesn't matter. The only real advantage of a borehole is neater. It's dearer, but it's neater if you've got both. I mean, I appreciate money or space are not an issue. It's very, very hard to get my head around that idea. But no, they're both as efficient as each other. You have to think about them differently. But there makes no, in terms of the running the heat pump, it makes no difference.
Good, thanks, Alice, for that question. We had a question in before the session about warranties, and you did touch on it in the presentation. So maybe you can touch through in terms of warranty, both for the kit itself, but also for the installation. How does that work?
Yeah, so for your Mitsubishi air source heat pump, it's a 5-year warranty as standard. We get that as net service providers. So that is for labour and parts. So if anything were to need to be replaced, it'll be covered for everything. So it'll be no cost to the client. We have the option of paying, I believe it's a client can pay £300, and that can extend that for a further 2 years, giving you a 7-year in total. The last 2 years is only for parts only, but by that point, if you're thinking about it, if a larger part goes at that point, it is a good significant sort of money that you would have to put out if you didn't have that warranty. But it's really up to the client if they choose to do that. A lot of people take the 5 years, some people take the 7-year. Through Mitsubishi, we quite often will be called out on warranty cases, so we usually tend to try and repair any of that. If there's any that we've installed, we would go out to 2, but Mitsubishi can also contact us and have us go out to other warranty cases and things like that. So it would usually be a local person that would get to go out to you. For the NIBI warranties, for the ground source heat pump, it's a 7-year warranty. That's a standard. So that's pretty substantial for, it's similar to some cars that you get. So it's really good. And usually we can get parts quite quickly within 3 to 5 days. We also offer a service plan, which is a monthly paid fee. And that will allow us to come out on mainland within 3 working days. We can't quite guarantee to get to some of the islands in that time, but we'll certainly do our best. And that will also reduce the cost slightly. So there's a lot of option out there. We also have a lot of training in other heat pumps. So there's a lot of heat pumps that we've not installed, other like Daikin and Samsung we've dealt with. So we will service other heat pumps as well that we've not installed. So it's quite well covered. The technology is meant to last for a good amount of time, but they are quite generous in trying to cover that for a good amount of time. We haven't had to do a huge significant deal of warranty claims once heat pumps are installed, so that's always a good sign. But yeah, they are protected if necessary.
And is there much, excuse my ignorance, but in terms of downhole technology, so is there anything that potentially could go wrong that's basically going to have to be dug up, or is it all kind of kept ground level?
I mean, if you're going to, in terms of the ground heat pumps, what you'll find is we try to avoid any joint in the ground. Typically, if we can get away with one hole collector, we'll go for it. If there's any joints, then we use electrofusion welding. It's like the pipe is a particular plastic. You get a fitting that's that plastic, and you apply an electric charge to it, and it welds the plastic to plastic, so they become one bit of plastic. But any joint in the ground, it'll either be a manifold chamber or a borehole cap, you'll know where that joint would be. Anything under the ground, you always keep an eye on it. I mean, it's very, very unlikely, but you have to kind of plan for the future.
Yes, at the end of the day, any fault can happen with anything. I mean, you're talking about cabling, you're talking about electrical faults, you're talking about anything at all. So really, in terms of the technology that we're talking about here, it's, things go wrong. But actually, it sounds like this is actually quite compact, and you actually, in terms of the impact, if anything does go wrong, that can be minimised. So no, it's we had another question in from Jane. So Jane was actually going back to Ollie's question about can solar thermal integrate with GSHP?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of that accreditation that we have to work to for the loan in the RHI and make sure they're up to the standard. We have to make sure the heat pump is capable of doing the full heating load when it gets cold, and all the domestic water when it gets cold. Anything added to that, it'll only benefit it. The only thing you have to think about is you have to make sure you've got enough for thermal to feed a domestic water tank. You've got to make sure you've got enough dedicated volume in the hot water tank for that thermal to run efficiently. It's a good bolt-on. But again, you have an extra coil in a hot water tank, and you can just feed into that. There again, the panel on the roof doesn't need to talk to the heat pump in any way. Yeah,
both NIBI and Mitsubishi do supply the solar cylinders, which is what Chris is on about. So you can actually have that as an option from the get-go if you are considering solar thermal too. So,
or you're planning to do it in the future.
Yeah.
So Jane, hopefully that answers your question. If you've got any additional, feel free to give Chris and Kelly a quick call. After this, I assume you guys are back in the office tomorrow morning at Chirpy account. Was it 7 o'clock? Is that what time?
8:30, not too bad.
We also had a couple other questions about servicing and maintenance. In terms of ongoing maintenance for the systems that you guys install, how does that work? Is it like an annual maintenance program, or is it just basically you install it and then there's very little maintenance thereafter?
So there is, it's a stipulation for the warranty and for MCS, so that you get your RHI payments, is that you get an annual service done every year. That's what part of the service plan would be, is that cost pays towards your annual service for a year. So that's really the only consideration you have to make in the year. There's not really anything else in that. And at that point, one of our engineers would come out, they check over the system, check they're happy with the operation. If there's anything that needs to be cleaned or checked, we would do it at that point. And then it's a record of it for the lifespan of it throughout it. It's more so for the case of you could possibly get audited from renewable heat incentive. It's just a desktop audit normally, but that's usually what the service is, to prove that you've had that done and that you're keeping the upkeep of the system. But that's really it. And that's usually something that, because we have a service plan, people forget about it. We'll contact them a month before it's due because they're on the list, and we'll go out whenever's convenient for them. So it is quite low maintenance on that side of things.
Chris, do you have anything to add to there?
I mean, in terms of for a client to do, there's just very little. I mean, we're, as a company, we like Kelly talked about in her presentation, and she talked about, and we do a lot of island work. We travel to Aberdeen, clearly, up north. We travel. I mean, if you're not a ferry trip, you're local. We tend to, nothing is perfect in technology. The machines are pretty good, but they're reliable. And for the most part, a client never has to do anything with a heat pump. We get in touch every year and book a time that's good for them, for the engineer to come out, but fit and forget for the most part.
It's probably no different to any other kind of gas or electric kind of maintenance program. It's if you look after your kit, then hopefully you'll be trouble free for the year before and after. So, we also had a question about an average family of 4. Will the heat pump provide enough hot water for my house? I don't know if you've got enough information to be able to answer that question, but so for an average family of 4, will the heat pump provide enough hot water for my house?
Yeah, I mean, typically for that kind of number of people, it's a 300-litre hot water tank is what we're looking for. The rule state for building regulations, 425 litres per bedroom, add 1. So it's a 4-bedroom property, 45 times 5. But we tend to go a wee bit over the top with domestic water. We don't go way overboard, but we'd rather, the complaint was that we've got too much hot water than not enough. If it comes down to it, I mean, that's a 300-litre tank. It's probably the biggest kind of standard domestic tank. But there are 400s available. There are 500s available. You can get carried away because there's no real harm having as much hot water as you want, but it starts to become inefficient to that point. But yeah, you pretty much got options available to you. But typically, for a 4-bedroom property, 300-litre tank would be about right.
Good stuff. Thomas Lawrenson come back and said, when can you come and give me a quote?
Kelly, no, that's definitely for Kelly.
As soon as possible. It's a case of get in touch with us. As Chris said, we'll run you sort of through a budget quote, give you an idea of what you're looking at, find out what it is you're interested in, and then it'll be myself or my colleague Sarah. We will get in touch and have an engineer come out and survey the property, answer any questions that you have, just sort of find the most viable routes for like pipe work, the placement of the heat pump itself, all those sort of things. We would just get an engineer out for a survey as soon as it was available. So yeah, just feel free to get in touch with us.
In terms of that turnaround in terms of being able to come out and do a quote, I mean, what are you guys looking at the moment? Is there a delay at the moment, or are you guys pretty reactionary in terms of what's coming through at the moment?
Surveys are a little bit easier because they tend to take, we do 2 hours for our surveys. It just depends if they're local. We have got an engineer that is based in Aberdeenshire who does surveys, so if it's over that side, it's a little bit easier. We are, for installations, booking reasonably far ahead at the moment, just because of the lag after COVID and everything. But usually we can get someone out within a few weeks for a survey. We certainly do our best to do it as quick as possible.
Good, thank you. And one other question come in. So in this world of online connectivity, can the installed system be connected to an app?
Yeah, they're all there now. I mean, the heating, if you go for heating, we do heat manager controls, the Neo controls, they're NIBE uplink, Neo Hub even, too many different variations. They have online connectivity, the NIBE has the NIBE uplink, Mitsubishi has the Mail Cloud. A lot of them are web-based at the moment. I'm sure the apps are coming. The N4 heating app-based. They're definitely all online. I have no doubt the manufacturers are working on apps now too.
Yeah. We install in a lot of people have holiday homes and things like that and are not in the properties for a long time, so it gives them sort of reassurance that they can kind of monitor things as they go and whatnot. And it's the same for like people with B&Bs, they can monitor each room and whatnot. So yeah, it's quite good that you have that option, but hopefully they get the apps quite soon, because I think that would be a lot easier for us to explain to people too. So
I don't know about you, but there's just too many apps out there. Like information overload. You're getting kind of information flashing up on your phone all the time about, your curtains are open, your curtains are closed, and that's like, whoa, right? But no, it's for people that do actually want. I mean, this is a really important part of the build and really important part of the operation of your home. So, is that a seagull?
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
It can be a big adjustment. Well, for some people trying to get used to new controls, especially if you've got multiple technologies. But we do a heating demo when we pass over the house, whether that's, we could be working directly with a builder and they've not moved in yet, and we'll organise a heating demo at a later date. But we are also, if you ever just phone us, Chris is really good at like talking people through anything with the controls. So they are quite easy to use.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So if people want to get in touch with you guys, what is the best way of being able to reach out to you guys?
Kelly?
Well, you can call us. We've got a landline on 01349 877 029. There's various options on that. You'd initially be probably speaking to the design team, but you can call in and we'll divert you to the right person. You can also email us. My email is kelly@bir.scot and Chris is chris@bir.scot. But you can also email our info@, which is info@bir.scot. We have Facebook, Instagram. You're welcome to go onto our website. Whatever's easiest, you should be able to get us.
Brilliant. No, it's been really useful and certainly useful for me as well. It's there's so many aspects of a self-build and a major renovation that you have to really think about, and the temptation is there to try and understand it all, but really you have to understand who are the experts out there, who knows what's going on in the marketplace, not just for the technology, but also for the incentives and grants to make it really affordable for you guys. So I really appreciate your time joining us this evening. It's been useful. We have in a couple of weeks, we're joined by Kishorn Installations, who will be talking about insulation. Apologies, Mike Bauermaster, I think his surname is pronounced. So he will be joining us, and he'll be talking through the various kind of alternative methods to be able to install insulation. So I'm going to put a wee kind of video on just to show you a little bit more about what Kishorn talk about. So just here we go.
Daniel Tweets. I'm the director of Kishorn Insulations. Kishorn Insulations is an installer of the Isonine spray foam insulation system, and we have a range of solutions for new builds and retrofit scenarios, including injection behind lath plaster walls, existing underfloor suspended floor insulation, warm roof insulation, and we insulate new builds as well to create a real airtight seal on a new building. We're based between Aberdeen and Kishorn, offices in Aberdeen and Kishorn, but really we cover Scotland wide. We work with a range of developers and architects and private clients to really make sure that we give the best for their building.
So hopefully you can join us in a couple of weeks. Listen, Kelly, Chris, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Hopefully I've learned or at least understood a bit more about heat pumps and various kind of aspects of that part of the self-build and major renovation. Anyone's got any questions thereafter, feel free to ping us a message or get in contact with Black Isle Renewable directly. So again, thank you guys, and yeah, hopefully everyone has an enjoyable rest of their Sunday evening.
Great, thank you.
Cheers now, bye bye.